Hey guys, tonight we wander into a world of soot, spice and sizzling treats. A place where your modern stomach may not stand a chance. You're stepping barefoot onto the uneven cobblestones of a bustling medieval marketplace, and it hits you instantly. The smell. It's not one smell, it's everything at once. Roasted nuts singed at the edge of char, pork pies leaking hot grease onto wooden trays, spilled mead soaking into dirty straw, and under it all, smoke. Thick, resinous, clinging to your clothes and your lungs. A chimney's worth of firewood smoulders behind an ale cart, where a boy in a burlap tunic fans coals with a duck feather. You weave past a woman grinding peppercorns with the grim focus of someone who once saw a man faint from mild stew. The clang of ladles and coughs of soot mix with children yelling about pies that may or may not have actual meat inside. A man roars the word cheesecakes, though his wares look suspiciously like beige pancakes dressed in disappointment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these sleepy little stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle toward the scent of roasting nuts. The vendor, a wiry woman with soot in her eyebrows, grins and hands you a parchment cone of honey-glazed almonds. You take a bite. Crunch. Chewy inside. Sweet, yes, but there's also something aggressively smoky. Like the sugar caught fire and she leaned in and whispered, "Perfect." And that's just the beginning. To your left, a boy half your height hawks lard-drenched meat pasties while balancing a rat on his shoulder like a fashion statement. Behind him, a pig's head rotates lazily over open flame, eyes glazed, tongue lolling. A group of students, if you count drunk scribes in training, argue about whether cinnamon is a spice or a sin. Mainstream records confirm that markets like this flourished across medieval Europe, from Paris to Prague, as early as the 12th century. Vendors shouted, children scattered, and aromas danced a far wider range than you might assume. While bread and ale reigned supreme, meat pies, spiced nuts and fried dough were practically the era's street food staples. But even here, a quirk slips in. One vendor tosses sprigs of lavender into his stew, claiming it cures melancholy and bad dreams. You try a sample, it tastes like perfumed sadness. Scholars remain divided on whether such herbal additions were culinary flair or just desperate improvisation. Either way, your tongue feels vaguely tricked. You pause by a stall selling hot cheese wrapped in vine leaves. It melts like warm clay and clings to your teeth like regret. An old man eating it beside you mutters something about saintly curds. You nod solemnly, though neither of you knows what that means. As you wander deeper into the market, you brush against a banner advertising healing sweets. You squint at the ingredients: honey, ginger, licorice root, and dried beetle shells. Experts still debate whether insects were added for crunch, colour, or medieval mischief. Either way, you pass. You duck under a creaky archway and find yourself face to face with a group of teens gnawing on what looks like old shoes dipped in syrup. It's actually a form of fried barley dough known in some circles as monk's delight, though the monk nearby looks anything but delighted. Somewhere, a bell rings. Not a church bell, but a dessert bell. You don't know how you know, but your feet know. You pivot toward it and spot a wheelbarrow full of miniature pies with steam whispering from their seams. They smell of apples, rosemary, and maybe a hint of regret. It's worth noting that the medieval concept of dessert didn't resemble the modern sugar bomb finale of a three-course meal. Sweets were scattered throughout the day, layered into breads, stews, and snacks. Honey was king. Sugar was an import, expensive and exotic. So anything sweet at a street level was either flavoured with dried fruit or doused in local honey, thick enough to hold a spoon upright. And you feel that thickness now as another vendor hands you a candied hazelnut cluster. It glues your molars together with such force you wonder if medieval dentists were simply blacksmiths with sharper tongs. You take a step, slow now, heavier. Your stomach has questions, but you hush it. There's more to see, more to chew, more to regret. The sky's turning indigo. Lanterns flicker to life, casting long shadows between the stalls. And though you're only halfway through your first handful of sticky, spicy street food, you sense something deeper unfolding here. Something not just about flavour, but survival, ritual, and the sheer boldness of eating anything that looks like it survived the fire by accident. Your fingers are tacky, your breath vaguely cheese-forward, your heart curiously full. You haven't seen the worst of it yet. You're sticky, slightly winded, and at least 2 mouthfuls beyond your comfort zone. But the night isn't letting you go. Not yet. Just ahead, lit by the crooked glow of a fish oil lantern, you spot something frying in a copper pan. The smell hits first. Spiced, hot, a little like Joy wearing muddy boots. You inch closer and see them. Golden, puffy fritters crisping in the fat. A girl with a squint and flour-smudged cheeks flips them with a twig she insists is sacred. She calls them frictella. They sizzle, pop, and collapse in the pan like overexcited dough clouds. You buy one. The first bite is revelatory. It's a deep-fried puff of flour, egg, honey, and maybe nutmeg, assuming you trust the girl's vague shrug when asked. It tastes like what modern donut holes want to be when they grow up. But here's the kicker. She set up shop right outside the cathedral. People stream out from vespers, clutching their little fritter bags and wiping sugar from their lips while muttering prayers. It's an odd dance, contrition and crunch. And you can't help but wonder, was this food, or was it flirting with blasphemy? Historians point out that religious feast days were often the only sanctioned time for indulgent food, meaning the calendar did more than track saints. It told your belly when it was allowed to sin. On days like Shrove Tuesday, the streets would erupt with fritters, cakes, and syrupy breads just before the fasting of Lent. And yet, the line between holy and hungry was blurry. You chew slowly, trying to savour it, but the fritter's already gone, and your fingers, covered in amber lacquer, sticky righteousness. You glance up at a monk pacing nearby. He sees the fritters, sniffs once, and mutters something about gluttony and lace. He buys 3. Here, junk food wasn't just a guilty pleasure, it was a ritual. The church tried to regulate excess, but humans? We fry our rebellion in oil and coat it in honey. That hasn't changed much, has it? You lean against a stone wall and let the sugar settle. Then you hear it again. Hiss, pop. Someone's frying onions. You follow the sound and arrive at a makeshift tavern stall where an alewife stirs thick rings of onions in batter made from yesterday's beer. She dunks them in hot fat with the bored elegance of someone who's been doing this since crusaders walked past. You take a bite of one. Hot, greasy, sharp with mustard. It's somewhere between snack and punishment. Your eyes water. A rat darts past your boot. You flinch, but no one else even notices. There's something almost modern about this. Fried onions, beer batter, a splash of mustard, this is medieval bar food. Served not on plates, but in rough scraps of cloth or, if you're lucky, a cabbage leaf. Records from 13th century London detail vendors selling sops and sippets, small chunks of fried bread or vegetable dipped in sauces meant to soak up the ale and shame. Alewives often doubled as cooks, gossip-mongers, and part-time saints of the hangover cure. The jury's out on whether these snacks were served hot consistently. Some accounts suggest they were pre-fried and sold cold, while others claim on-the-spot sizzling. Either way, yours are hot enough to singe your tongue and soul. The woman stares at you, then gestures toward a bowl of thick mustard. You hesitate, but dip the next onion anyway. The spice explodes like medieval napalm. Your eyes stream. She laughs softly, like someone who's watched many outsiders cry into their snack. And here, right in the middle of onion tears and fritter guilt, is the perfect moment to drop in with this little ask. Whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. You step away from the stall, heart thumping faster than it should from onions. A street performer drums on a pan using sausage links as drumsticks. You watch in silence. He's weirdly good. A young couple walks by holding hands and sharing something wrapped in oily linen. You lean in. It's fried apple slices dusted in sugar and cinnamon. Cinnamon? That's a luxury. Probably smuggled, or stolen, or diluted with dried birch bark and nobody's admitting it. You watch them laugh and realise something. Medieval street food wasn't just fuel. It was play. It was affection. It was defiance. Fried dough doesn't just fill you. It reminds you you're alive, even if your stomach disagrees. A scholar once wrote that medieval snacks straddled the line between sustenance and spectacle. And you feel that now. You're full, amused, a little spicy in the mouth, and somehow more awake than you planned. But don't worry. The weirdest thing you'll eat tonight is still ahead of you. You're officially too full for comfort, but also strangely curious. Because just past the tavern stalls lit by flickering rushlights and the occasional moonbeam lies a row of makeshift carts that smell complicated. You catch a whiff of something vinegary, smoky, fishy, and, is that mustard again? A boy in a leather apron stabs a wriggling skewer into the air and shouts, "Eels! Fresh ones!" You flinch. Surely not. But yes, it's exactly that. A row of slick, twitching river eels now impaled on sticks, glistening with oil and brushed with a paste that smells like mustard, ale, and possibly regret. He slaps one onto a slab of hot stone and the skin starts to curl, split, hiss. It smells like spicy fish bacon, if such a thing were ever meant to exist. And before you can say, "No thank you, I'm quite eel-free," one's already in your hand. You stare. It stares back. At least it feels that way. But you take a bite. The texture is alarming. Flaky, oily, slightly chewy. The flavour, surprisingly rich. Smoky, peppery, with that unmistakable metallic tang of river life. Not bad, you think, if your mind would stop screaming worm. Fish worm. Street food in the medieval world was, after all, regional. In areas near rivers, eel was practically a staple. Cheap, abundant, and easy to grill or stew. Fried eel on a stick was the medieval version of a hot dog. Questionable in origin, dangerously delicious, and found in the hands of very questionable people. The boy tells you to dip it in the mustard. You do. Big mistake. Your sinuses catch fire. You feel your eyebrows lift involuntarily as if trying to abandon your face. The mustard is sharp, horseradishy, and possibly laced with medieval spite. Your eyes water. Your soul whimpers. You nod in approval. Historians note that medieval condiments weren't just about flavour. They were protective. Mustards, vinegars, and herbs were thought to balance the humours and prevent disease. Of course, modern scholars remain divided on whether this actually worked, or just gave people fancier ways to mask rot. You shuffle away, coughing slightly, licking eel oil from your fingers, and wondering how your ancestors survived without Tums. Just ahead, the street swells into a fairground. Ribbons strung between poles flap in the breeze. Children run past in paper masks shaped like wolves. A juggler tosses onions. You find yourself pulled into the strange joy of it all. And what's that smell? It's meat. Definitely meat. Cooked inside something. Flaky. You push through a crowd and find her. The pie lady. Her cart is draped in checkered cloth, her hands dusted with flour, and her pies, golden brown, steam-puffing, suspiciously tempting. You watch her wrap a few in linen and hand them off to customers with a knowing smile. You step forward. "What's in it?" you ask. She winks. "Yes." Not helpful, but it's too late. You're holding one. It's warm, heavy, crisp at the edge. You take a bite. It's savoury, rich. Maybe pork, maybe chicken, maybe squirrel. The pastry is buttery and crackling. The filling is herby, moist and indistinct in the way all meats become when slow-cooked beyond recognition. You're 3 bites in before your brain catches up and screams, "Do you even want to know?" Medieval pies were a genius disguise. They preserved meat longer, masked odd textures, and often doubled as portable meals. Recipes from 14th century cookbooks describe pies filled with larks and finches, marrow and dates, or, in one nightmare recipe, hedgehog baked in crust. The crust itself, called a coffin, was often inedible. A thick flour and water shell meant to keep the filling safe during long days or bumpy roads. Whether you ate the coffin or not depended on your status. Rich folks had servants to toss the crust. Poor folks scraped it clean. You're licking crumbs off your fingertips. So, probably not nobility. Scholars still debate whether medieval cooks intentionally masked odd meats, or if taste just wasn't as picky back then. Either way, your current pie might contain anything from boar to pigeon to yesterday's regret. And it is undeniably delicious. You pause beside a barrel to catch your breath, and realise it's not a barrel. It's a pie, a massive pie, the size of a sheep, with a pastry goose emerging from the top. Its head is real. Taxidermied. You back away slowly. The pie remains confident. Fairground food in the Middle Ages was a show. Vendors competed not only in taste but spectacle. Pies with live birds baked inside. so when cut open, they flew out. Cakes shaped like castles. Sausages dyed red with beetroot for dramatic flair. It wasn't about nutrition, it was about ta-da! And somehow, in the middle of this sweet, salty and occasionally horrifying carnival, your stomach is intrigued. A boy throws a hot fritter at a duck and laughs. A nobleman sneezes on a meat stick. A goat eats a tax scroll. And you, with your third stomach now awakened, are eyeing something sweet glinting under torchlight. It looks innocent. It's not. You step toward the next stall, one selling sugar lumps the size of jawbreakers, and silently vow to chew carefully this time. The sugar lump stares back at you with the quiet menace of something that's caused at least one tooth to shatter this week. It's round, vaguely pink, and smells faintly like a perfume shop on fire. A girl no older than 10 holds the tray. "Rosewater candy," she chirps. You glance at her, then at the candy, then back at her. Her expression doesn't blink. You nod. She hands it over like a tiny merchant of dental doom. You pop it into your mouth, and for a second it's just sweet, syrupy, delicate. Then the rosewater hits. It's like licking a bishop's soap bar, flowery, soapy, sharp. And there's something gritty in the centre. You bite down and feel your molar make a small panicked noise. Sugar in the medieval world wasn't refined and innocent. It was crystalline, hard, expensive, and often adulterated with flour, ash, or powdered stone, if you bought it from the wrong stall, which, let's be honest, you just did. Still, people loved it, especially the wealthy. Manuscripts from noble households list confections like dragees, candied almonds, preserved citrus peels, and flour-flavoured syrups. But even the poor snuck a taste when they could. Hence the rise of the penny sweet, often nothing more than boiled honey, spice, and illusion. You chew on what's probably just dried glue with rose scent and feel your jaw lock slightly. The girl smiles. "Want a ribbon with that?" She holds up a strip of red cloth dusted in what might be sugar or powdered brick. You politely decline. She shrugs and sells it to a toothless knight. You move on, jaw sore and dignity bruised. Then a shout grabs your attention. Bread bowls, hot soup. Fill your hands and your heart. You turn. A robust woman with forearms like carved oak beckons from behind a cauldron. Steam wafts up in slow coils. Surrounding her are loaves of bread with hollowed-out centres, bubbling with thick brown stew. You approach. "Lentil or tripe?" she asks. You pause. She chooses for you. The bowl is warm, the stew aggressive, salty with a suspicious chew. The bread softens under your grip, leaking slightly. You sip, then bite the rim of the bowl. It tastes good. Too good. You sit on a crate and inhale the whole thing, slowly breaking down the edible container like a hungry architect dismantling a cathedral. And here's the thing. Bread bowls were a thing. Historians have recorded similar practices in many parts of Europe during the late Middle Ages, particularly at alehouses and during festivals. Hard rolls or stale round loaves were hollowed and filled with whatever the cook had. A peasant version of Tupperware, if you will. But the stew inside, that was a gamble. You hear a man groan nearby. He had the tripe. You nod to yourself. You made the right call. Experts still debate whether dishes like this were mainly poor folk fare or a novelty repurposed by taverns. One camp insists it was a clever use of day-old bread. The other claims it was just laziness with a crust. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between flavour and function. Now your belly's hot and heavy, and you start to feel it, the medieval food coma. Equal parts fullness and faint dread. But you're not done. Because just past the soup stall, a man in a feathered cap juggles apples while calling out, "Chestnuts, warm as sin," and you can't resist. Roasted chestnuts, cracked open, still steaming with a pinch of salt and maybe, is that cinnamon again? You lean in, take a sample and chew. It's perfect. Soft, earthy, and just sweet enough to make you smile despite the eel-mustard combo still echoing in your throat. He grins and tosses another one your way. You catch it like a pro. You huddle near his brazier, warmth seeping into your hands, chestnuts nestled in parchment. Around you, villagers gossip. Not in whispers, but in sing-song bursts. Who married whom? Who lost a pig? Who owes what to whom? Gossip, as ever, is the dessert of language. One old man leans in and mutters, "She burned his tunic because he forgot the feast day." Then bites a chestnut. You nod respectfully. Street food, you realise, is more than food. It's a stage, a place where lives are chewed over as easily as fritters, and you, sticky and stuffed, are now part of the scenery. Which reminds me, if you're still with me on this medieval snack safari, tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. Now the wind picks up and you wrap your cloak tighter, though it's mostly just to keep your chestnuts warm. The lanterns flicker. Someone begins to sing a half-forgotten drinking song about love, war, and cheese. And as you lean back, chewing one last roasted nut, you wonder, what else did they sneak into their snacks? You're about to find out. You stretch your legs, burp quietly into your sleeve, and attempt to recover a sense of dignity. It's not easy when your cloak smells like mustard, roasted eel, and singed sugar. But something new wafts through the air now, rich, buttery, and just a little suspicious. You follow your nose past a torchlit corner and find a pie seller crouched low beside a brazier, smiling with the serenity of someone who knows their customers never ask questions. Her cart has no signs, no labels, just pies. You pick one up. It's warm, flaky, sealed tightly. Too tightly. You glance up. She nods like a mother watching her child walk into traffic. Best not to ask what's inside, she says gently. You bite anyway. It's good. Rich, a little peppery. You catch notes of thyme and onion, a hit of gaminess. But the meat? Unidentifiable. Your brain runs through possibilities like a frantic butcher. Chicken? Maybe. Rabbit? Could be. Squirrel? Possible. Rat? You hope not. Horse? You pray not. She sees the panic in your eyes and pats your shoulder with a flowery hand. It's meat, she offers. Mainstream history confirms that for most of the medieval population, meat was either a luxury or a gamble. Rich feasts featured swan, peacock and boar. But for the street folk, anything that walked, flew or skittered was fair game, especially if it could be minced into unrecognisable submission and baked under pastry. What's known as mystery meat today was a daily reality then. If it wasn't obviously fish or bird, it probably came from the don't ask category. Some pies even mix meats with dried fruits, spices, and breadcrumbs to create an exotic blend that confused both the senses and the stomach. You take another bite. The flavour deepens. There's a chewy bit, maybe cartilage. You don't want to know. A scholar once joked that the only way to identify the contents of a medieval pie was to wait and see which animal you stopped seeing around town. And yet, people kept eating them, enthusiastically. You wipe your fingers on your cloak, which at this point could be considered a food diary, and look around. The pie seller's cart is attracting a crowd. A lanky teen offers a coin and asks, "Is it lamb?" She winks. "Sure." Scholars remain divided on whether the ambiguity was born of necessity, laziness, or deliberate mischief. Some claim vendors took pride in the surprise. Others believe it was just a result of terrible lighting and questionable inventory. You're pondering all of this when a sudden, high-pitched yelp pierces the night. You spin around and see a terrier galloping down the lane, followed by a furious cook waving a cleaver and shouting something about stolen filling. You swallow hard and pretend not to connect the dots. You step aside, heart racing, and spot a quieter stall tucked between two crates. A small girl stands there with a tray of reddish candies arranged in spirals. She holds one up. Sugar twist? Real raisins inside. You hesitate. Then a woman in a ragged dress sidles up beside you and murmurs, "Don't do it. Last one I tried had beetles." You back away slowly. This is the world you're in now, where dessert and dare have become the same thing. You wander back toward the main square, stomach rumbling in that weird post-pie way. Not hungry, not full, just wary. And then, as if fate has a terrible sense of humour, you smell something sweet. Again. But this time, it's warm. Cinnamon spiced, wrapped in paper. Your nose guides you to a hunched man balancing a dozen tiny baked pockets on a wide wooden tray. He sees your face and lifts one high. "Figgy dumpling? Or date surprise?" you ask cautiously. "What's the surprise?" He grins. "Might be nut, might be seed, might be..." Plum that lied. You take one, because of course you do, because you've clearly given up. It's soft, warm, clove-scented, and blessedly free of any animal byproduct, or so you hope. It tastes like Christmas if Christmas had fewer candles and more insects flying overhead. Truth is, dried fruits were the sweeteners of choice in medieval kitchens before sugar became even remotely affordable. Figs, plums, raisins and dates were imported, traded or grown locally and boiled down into dense cakes or folded into pastries. The problem? Without refrigeration, anything chewy and sweet became a nesting ground for surprises. Still, yours is decent. No crunch that shouldn't be there. No wriggling. That's a win tonight. You sit on a barrel and watch the crowds pass, eating, shouting, laughing, occasionally arguing over who stole whose pigeon pie. And as you chew the last bite of your maybe fig, maybe date treat, you think, you've officially crossed into dangerous snack territory. You've got pie residue under your nails, eel oil in your hair, a sugar lump still lodged in your molars. And you're not even halfway done. Your fingers are sticky. Your cloak smells of 3 different meats and 2 sugars. And still, you walk toward the next food stall like a moth to a honey-glazed flame. This one looks more innocent. It's run by a barefoot peasant woman whose apron is stained with something green and wet. She smiles, revealing exactly 4 teeth, and gestures toward a wooden tray stacked with what looks like little cabbage patties. "Try a hot one, love," she says, fresh from the skillet. You pick one up. It's warm, soft, a little lumpy. You bite in. Instantly your mouth is on fire. It's cabbage, sure, but it's spiced cabbage, and not the mild kind. There's something in there. Pepper, mustard seed, ground nettles, possibly all 3. Your tongue itches. Your eyes water. You make a small wheezing sound through your nose. The woman watches calmly. "It clears the humours," she says, nodding like she just delivered a sermon. Humour theory ruled medieval medicine, and this snack seems scientifically designed to purge all of them. You chew slowly, breathing like someone who just discovered what folk medicine actually tastes like. Still, it's interesting, not bad, just intense. Historical accounts suggest these cabbage cakes, or their cousins, leek fritters, were a common street food among peasants. Cheap to make, easy to fry, and oddly versatile, they could be eaten on their own or dipped in thick porridge or even yesterday's soup. The spice? Often a defence. Cabbage in the Middle Ages turned fast. A generous hand with mustard seed could disguise a cabbage's age with a vengeance. You swallow the last bite like someone accepting fate. Your tongue now tingles pleasantly, and the back of your throat is aware of its own existence in a whole new way. You wipe your hands on your cloak. Again, it's basically a food towel at this point, and continue. The sun's fully down now. Torches flicker from every corner, casting the fairground in gold and shadow. Someone nearby sings a drinking song that rhymes parsnip with bishop. You applaud quietly. As you turn a corner, another scent drifts your way. Not sweet, not fried, something dark. A man stands beside a cauldron. His clothes are stained, his expression is blank. Beside him, a board displaying black sausages, some coiled like rope, others chopped into chunks. "Black pudding," he mutters, offering a sample. You hesitate, he shrugs. "Only a little blood." "Ah, you take one. It's warm, dense, earthy." The flavour hits slowly. Grain, onion, salt, and a faint iron tang that doesn't let you forget what it is. You chew, it's surprisingly good. Terrifying in origin, yes, but oddly comforting. Blood pudding, also known as black pudding, was a medieval staple, particularly in regions where wasting animal parts was unthinkable. It's a mixture of blood, typically pig, mixed with oats, suet, spices, and sometimes onion. Stuffed into casings, boiled and cooled, it could be sliced, fried, and eaten hot or cold. Think of it as the original energy bar, if you will. Still, the concept unnerves most modern minds. Even then, some folks couldn't stomach it. But in winter, with little else available, a hot slab of pudding was the difference between nourishment and starvation. Scholars remain divided on just how often blood puddings were consumed by the average peasant. Some argue they were reserved for butchering days and festivals. Others insist they were part of regular village meals, especially in colder months. You finish your sample and smile weakly at the vendor. He nods solemnly, then turns back to his cauldron like a man who has seen things. Dark, sausage-shaped things. You wander a bit, slower now, heavier. Ahead, a juggler balances apples on his nose. A goat climbs a cart and sniffs a candle. Someone in the distance sneezes so violently that a pigeon takes flight. It's all absurd and beautiful and slightly unsanitary, you stop near a barrel to rest. A child runs past, laughing, holding a stick with what looks like a roasted beet impaled on the end. You blink. You're not sure what's real anymore. You reach into your pocket and find a chestnut, still warm. You smile. Then a voice beside you says, "Ever try mouse bread?" You turn slowly. A skinny man with a feathered cap grins and holds up a roll. You stare. It's just a bun, a nicely browned, round roll. Then he breaks it open. Inside is a mouse. Whole, cooked, intact. Legs curled like punctuation marks. You make a sound no human should ever make. The man laughs. "Just a joke, friend. It's pastry rat." This does not help. He takes a bite, chews thoughtfully, and wanders off. You sit down and question every decision you've made since arriving here. You're full. You're confused. Your stomach is trying to file a complaint with your brain. And somehow, you're ready for the next bite. You're not sure if you're still hungry or just temporarily possessed by medieval snack demons. But you find yourself drifting again, this time toward the edge of the square, where a lone figure stands beside a bubbling pot and a modest stack of leaves. Large, dark, veiny leaves. The woman is older, wrapped in a saffron-coloured wool cloak, with soot smudges on her chin and an expression of complete culinary confidence. She gestures to a nearby bench and says, "Soup?" You nod before you even know why. She takes a dense chunk of bread, hollows it slightly with a spoon, and ladles in a slow-moving brown stew that smells like garlic and resignation. You recognise the scent of goat cheese too. She tops it with a spoonful of melted lard and a whisper of ground juniper. The bowl feels heavier than your regrets. You take a sip. The soup is, let's say, pungent. It's rich, chewy, garlicky, and carries the kind of heat that doesn't burn so much as bloom slowly like a bad idea. The bread starts to melt at the edges, softening into an edible sponge. You chew a corner and get hit with the double punch of old grain and sour goat cheese. You're instantly aware that your breath could kill a basilisk. In medieval Europe, garlic was treasured for both culinary and medicinal purposes. It was believed to ward off illness, evil, and overly friendly suitors. Goat cheese, on the other hand, was a rural staple, easier to produce and store than cow's milk in many regions. When combined, the two made an unbeatable peasant snack. Cheap, filling, powerful in scent, and, if you added vinegar, almost spiritual in its intensity. Some monasteries even rationed garlic as medicine. Others banned it entirely to preserve moral purity. Experts still debate whether medieval communities embraced garlic for its flavour, or merely tolerated it as a necessity. One monk's diary refers to it as the devil's bulb, while another called it a kiss killer that strengthens the gut. Honestly, both seem accurate. You lean back on the bench, mouth tingling and face flushed. A stray cat approaches, sniffs your breath, and flees. The woman chuckles. It builds character. As you recover, she hands you a little leaf-wrapped wedge of soft cheese. For after, cleans the palate. You accept it. She's lying, but that's fine. You bite in. Nope, not a palate cleanser. That was aggressively aged goat cheese. It tastes like a barn smells after a thunderstorm. Your vision blurs slightly. You nod in appreciation anyway. She approves. This is the medieval version of a cheese course. No delicate slivers or grapes. Just fermented curd packed in leaves and shared among strangers in the smoky dark. Beautiful in its own traumatic way. A boy approaches, clutching his stomach, and mutters, "Do you have something gentler?" She hands him a bowl of thin broth and pats his head like a forgiving god. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, completely giving up on any sense of etiquette, and stand, only to hear a nearby group giggling around a fire pit. You're drawn over like a moth to gossip. They're eating roasted garlic cloves, pulling them apart and placing them on hard bread smeared with honey. The combination is surprisingly elegant. Sweet and sharp, warm and sticky. They pass you a slice. You nod thanks, bite in, and finally understand why medieval romance was slow. Everyone was too busy digesting and breathing carefully. The fire crackles. Shadows dance across faces lined with soot and oil and laughter. A woman nearby whispers, "He kissed me after leeks and ale." I said it was bravery. He said it was fate. You smile into your bread. And right then, the alewife from earlier reappears, this time carrying a massive tray of wafer-thin crackers speckled with something dark. She offers you one. You crunch it. Caraway seeds, cracked pepper, a hint of mystery. You chew slowly, nodding. This is how the night feeds you. Not in courses, not in measured bites, but in waves of surprise and spice and history, packed into things that crackle and melt and linger. Your stomach may be plotting revenge, but your heart, it's oddly content. You've shared soup with a stranger, goat cheese with a goddess, and garlic with the moon. And as the fairground dims into deeper night, you wonder, what did they snack on when they weren't supposed to be snacking? Because you're about to find out. It's late now, not time to go home late, but the kind of medieval late where the firelight thins, the air cools sharply, and every voice sounds a little too loud in the quiet. You move slower, your steps weighted with roasted regret and crumb fatigue. But still, you drift toward the next scent like a butter-soaked pilgrim. You stop when you see them. Chestnuts, roasting slowly over open coals, their shells splitting gently with soft cracks. A man with hair like a thatched roof and hands like tree bark turns them with deliberate care. His cart is nothing more than a slab of wood balanced on two mismatched wheels, but it carries the air of sacred ritual. You stand beside the brazier soaking up the heat. He looks at you. You want warm hands or warm truths? Just chestnuts, you whisper. He grins. Same thing. He scoops a few into a linen pouch and presses it into your palm. They're hot. So hot it's almost too much to hold. Almost. You crack one open. It's perfect. Soft, steaming, sweet without needing sugar. The shell flakes away like old bark and you pop the chestnut in your mouth. It's calm. Comforting, like a nap you didn't know you needed. Roasted chestnuts were winter staples across medieval Europe, sold on street corners, outside churches, and at the fringes of festivals they were cheap, portable and warming. Some towns even had designated roasting areas, pits where families and vendors could prepare batches in bulk and trade them like edible currency. But they were more than snacks. They were conversation starters, story fuel, something to hold and crack and share while the world slowed around you. And share, people did. Two old men sit nearby on a crumbling stone wall. One of them cracks a chestnut with his teeth, probably the only tool he's got left, and mutters, "She swore she saw a ghost in the mill. Turns out it was her cousin with flour on his face." The other nods sagely. Happens. You eat another, and that's when the stories begin. One voice starts, soft and scratchy. "Remember the pig that stole the bishop's ring?" Laughter follows. Another joins in. "Remember when the peddler sold dried apple slices he swore were dragon tongue?" The air thickens not with food, but memory. Street corners in medieval towns weren't just places to eat. They were theatres, and roasted chestnuts, warm and steady, gave people something to do with their hands while their mouths chased truth, fiction, or somewhere delightfully in between. You lean against a post, watching smoke curl from the brazier and mingle with the last breath of daylight. Someone plays a lute badly. A group of girls dances slowly around a puddle. A merchant snores gently beneath his own cart, chestnut skins littering his lap like autumn confetti. You crack another one open. It's a bit burnt, bitter. You eat it anyway. The old man beside you coughs once and says, "She burned the stew again, called it rustic." You nod solemnly. A younger woman nearby fans the coals and adds fresh nuts to the edge. Her hands are quick, practiced. She hums a tune with no name and offers a chestnut to a beggar boy with soot in his eyebrows. He takes it like treasure. Some scholars argue that roasted chestnuts helped anchor the seasonal rhythm of medieval life, especially in colder regions. Others believe their popularity came down to sheer availability and ease of preparation. Either way, they persisted through centuries, comfort clinging to their smoky shells. And here you are, eating a food unchanged in form or function since the days of plagues and pageants. You take your final chestnut, it crumbles perfectly between your fingers. The steam curls into your nose, warm and clean. You eat it, then breathe, then smile. This isn't the wild snack adventure of fried eels or onion fireballs. It's something gentler, softer, the kind of food that closes the mouth just long enough to open the heart. And as the cart begins to roll away into the dark, its wheels squeaking in rhythm with your full belly, you wonder what else might be cooking out there in the quiet corners. Something crunchy, something pickled, something you're definitely going to regret. Almost certainly. You're getting better at spotting danger now. The subtle twitch in a vendor's eye, the suspicious lack of signage, the phrase "goes down easy," spoken with a wink. These are the signs of medieval snack treachery, and you've learned, if not to avoid it, at least to brace yourself. Which is why, when a man waves you over to a steaming griddle and says, "Just a bit of cabbage and spice, nothing fancy," your gut clenches instinctively. Still, you approach. The cakes are flat, brown, and smell oddly inviting, like roasted grain and backyard experiments. He flips them with a bone-handled spatula and offers you one on a piece of bark. You bite in. It's hot. Not temperature hot, mouth hot. The cabbage is definitely there, but it's been overwhelmed by something fierce. Pepper, maybe, but also nettles, mint, and an herb that might be wild garlic or might be vengeance incarnate. You cough. Your ears ring, your nose runs slightly. He smiles. Peasant spice blend. Clears your head, right? You nod, tears forming. Your tongue goes a bit numb. Spiced cabbage cakes like these were common among the working class. Cabbage stored well and grew easily, making it a base for countless meals. Add some flour or old bread, mash it with herbs and fry it in lard. Voila, dinner. Or in your case, edible medieval regret. The spices used varied wildly. In the absence of costly imports like cinnamon or cloves, peasants turned to local herbs with strong flavour profiles. Mustard seed, wild mint, garlic shoots, and even dried nettle leaves all featured prominently. Not necessarily to delight the palate, but to shock it into submission. Scholars remain divided on whether these strong flavours were an act of creativity or survival instinct. One camp argues it was bold culinary innovation. The other suspects desperate attempts to hide sour cabbage. Either way, your lips now tingle with awareness and you feel like you just gargled a garden. You down the rest of the cake bravely, and the vendor hands you a clay cup of something dark. "Wash it down," he says. You sip. It's thin, watery ale. Possibly last night's, possibly last week's. You nod gratefully anyway because your throat is starting to itch and you suspect your tongue may detach without assistance. A woman beside you sneezes from across the street. "Too much horseradish," she groans. You raise your cup in solidarity. Moving on, you pass a man roasting something small and round on a skewer. He turns it slowly over coals, smiling without blinking. You do not engage, you are learning. Instead, you stumble into a small clearing where someone has erected a makeshift lean-to, really just a curtain tied between two barrels. Behind it, a young man offers what looks like honey cakes. You're sceptical. Naturally, but your body's craving sugar. And the smell, warm, fermented, just a little burnt, is too much. You approach. "Mead cakes," he says, "baked with sweet wine, a noble's recipe." You squint. They look like flattened buns brushed with something shiny. The tops are studded with what might be pine nuts or possibly mouse teeth. You choose not to ask. You take a bite. It's soft. It crumbles. It melts into the back of your mouth with the dull heat of fermented honey, and what might be cinnamon or just enthusiastic nutmeg. You're instantly lightheaded. "Bit of mead in the dough," he adds helpfully, "and on the dough, and in the air." You nod, swaying slightly. Medieval mead cakes were indeed a thing. Dense, rich, and sometimes so boozy they were served in slices with cautionary tales. Mead was the working sweetener of the day, cheaper than sugar, more flavourful than honey, and helpful when disguising over-fermented flour or stale nuts. The man hands you another. You forget why you were sceptical and bite into it with the slow confidence of someone already half asleep. Scholars note that sweets like these were often given as festival food or wedding treats, symbols of joy and fertility. You feel both joyful and extremely fertile now, though that may just be the mild alcohol rush. The sun is gone, the moon's up, the food haze is real. You sink onto a nearby crate surrounded by crumbs and euphoria and stare into the firelight. Around you, people dance slowly, not to music, but to memory. Your stomach rumbles once, low and ominous, but your heart, it's floating on honey and smoke. You'd think by now your stomach would wave a white flag and beg for mercy. But medieval snack logic doesn't care about digestion. It runs on chaos, curiosity, and deeply suspicious pies, which is why, after 2 mead cakes and an herbal cabbage detonation, you now find yourself standing in front of a stall that smells like raisins and smoke. The vendor is about 12 years old. She has a satchel of hard candies shaped like beetles and a box of what she proudly calls ribbon sweets. "They're for weddings," she says, holding one up by the tail of a thin red strip. "Or curses. Depends." You nod slowly. What's in them? She beams. Mostly raisins, some cinnamon, some guesswork. It's shiny, slightly sticky, smells oddly metallic. You take one, give it a cautious nibble and, crunchy. Not dangerously so, but definitely not a tooth's best friend. It tastes of dried fruit, flour glue, and maybe cloves? You chew. It doesn't get better, but it doesn't get worse either. You call it a draw. Candied fruits, particularly raisins and plums, were popular across classes in the Middle Ages, though the quality varied drastically. While the nobility imported luxurious varieties from Spain and beyond, commoners dried whatever they could find, apples, cherries, or even overripe grapes pressed together into thick, chewy clumps. These were sweetened with honey, dusted with flour, and sold at markets for children, lovers, and those with nothing left to lose. You swallow. The aftertaste lingers like an unresolved argument. A few feet away, someone sells fruit twists, more like sticky ropes of fig paste, rolled in oats and dusted with what may be dirt. A woman holding a baby buys 3. You nod with respect. Next to them is a man handing out tiny wooden spoons of jelly. You approach cautiously. What kind? You ask. Quince, he says. Maybe. He's not sure. That's fine. You try a spoonful. It's tart, fibrous, oddly satisfying, somewhere between a jam and a dare. You chase it with a sip of watered-down cider handed to you by a stranger who says nothing, only nods once and walks away. You never see them again. Scholars remain divided on whether sweets like these were reserved for special occasions or part of daily life for commoners. Some argue that dried fruits were treasured and rationed, doled out as rewards or holiday gifts. Others believe they were simply too available not to chew constantly. You're still chewing. As you walk on, you find yourself in a darker corner of the fair. Fewer torches, quieter voices. Here, the sweets get creative. A wiry woman beckons you toward her cart, which appears to be stacked with wafers, flat, pale, and thin as parchment. Crackers, she says, with seed and spirit. You squint. What kind of seed? She grins. Depends who you ask. You take one. It snaps cleanly. Tastes of caraway and maybe burnt cumin. It's good, salty, sharp, weirdly addictive. In medieval times, caraway was a favourite for both sweet and savoury confections. Crackers made with ground rye and dusted in spice were a staple at courtrooms, merchant booths, and back-alley gaming tables. Easy to bake, easier to hide, and perfect for long journeys or long arguments. You crunch another. A man beside you asks the vendor if she accepts payment in song. She does. He sings about goats. It's oddly moving. The cracker breaks softly in your mouth, and suddenly you remember a tidbit you read once. Some monasteries baked communion-style wafers so thin you could see through them. The taste was mostly ashen piety, but they kept well. You pause mid-bite. These aren't holy, are they? The woman snorts. Nothing I make is holy. Fair enough. You thank her, brushing crumbs from your lap, and turn away just in time to avoid a man swinging a skewer of onions in each hand like maracas. The fair is changing. The chaos has dimmed, replaced by a mellow, rhythmic calm. People are sitting more, talking slower, eating less for hunger and more for comfort. Your hands are tired. Your tongue is tired. You didn't know that was possible, but there's still more. You pass a boy selling fried breadcrumbs, a girl hawking roasted turnips in honey glaze, a juggler tossing dried figs instead of apples, and you, walking through it all, with a stomach full of raisin stuff, goat cheese, blood sausage, cabbage spice, honey bread, and 1,000 strange little choices. The moon is higher now, the air cooler. The firelight dances gentler against the cobblestones. You wonder, did they dream about food back then? Because you might, soon. You'd hoped the food parade might slow down after the ribbon sweets and caraway crackers, but no, not tonight. Because just as your body begins the long negotiation with sleep, your nose picks up something unexpected. Something rich, savoury, suspicious. You follow it to a long trestle table near the edge of the square, a noble's feast, or at least the remains of one. Empty goblets, half-chewed bread, wilted herbs tossed like confetti. And in the centre, wrapped in flaky golden crust and garnished with actual ivy, is a pie. A large pie. An ornamental pie. Someone in a velvet cap is slicing it reverently while explaining its construction to a child who clearly doesn't care. You approach quietly, just in time to hear, "And the mice were baked alive, see? So when you cut the crust, they would jump out and delight the guests." The child shrieks. The man laughs. You, to your horror, are offered a slice. You look down. The crust is thick, glossy, puffed high with pride and egg yolk. Inside is a pale, chunky filling that may once have been meat, or mushrooms, or both. It smells buttery. You take a cautious bite. It's actually quite good. Then you find a tiny foot. Pause. Turns out, yes, some noble feasts did involve actual live pies, where small animals like frogs or birds were concealed beneath a hollow upper crust. The idea was spectacle. Slice the top, release chaos, and amuse your bored, probably drunk guests. The mouse part is less documented, but not impossible. You chew slowly and think, even their pranks were food-based. Scholars remain divided on whether these live-animal pies were common practice or exaggerated court tales. Some accounts describe them as rare theatrical moments, while others suggest that at least in certain regions they were just another form of entertainment, like a puppet show, but edible and squeaky. You swallow. No squeaking. You've made it through. Nearby, another guest examines a decorative sugar castle. Yes, a literal castle made of sugar paste, complete with tiny sugar guards and a licorice drawbridge. He bites the turret, it crumbles. He weeps openly, whether from emotion or dental trauma unclear. This is junk food, noble addition. While peasants chewed crusts and fried barley, the upper classes turned sugar into art. In banquets, it wasn't unusual to see entire table displays made from sugar. Birds, buildings, even full animals posed mid-flight. Called subtleties, these sugary sculptures were edible, symbolic, and sometimes wildly passive-aggressive. One noble once commissioned a sugar lion eating a monk. A message, perhaps. You walk past the sugar castle and nod solemnly at a woman eating what appears to be a marzipan piglet. She bites off the head first, a bold choice. Then, near the table's end, someone offers you a small pastry in the shape of a fish. "It's just almonds and flour," they whisper. "No surprises." You bite. It's dense, sweet, nutty, delicious. Almonds were a prized ingredient in medieval Europe, used in both cooking and illusion. Almond paste stood in for meat, cream, and even cheese when fasting or poverty forbade the real thing. In noble kitchens, almond milk was whisked into sauces or poured over grains as a sign of wealth. You imagine the sugarfish grinning knowingly as it dissolves on your tongue. Around you, nobles laugh. A jester hiccups and falls into a roast goose. No one moves to help. You step back from the table, full again, and find a quiet barrel to lean against. Your cloak is heavier now, not just with crumbs, but history. You've tasted a world of contrast. Peasants chewing nettle cakes, nobles slicing prank pies, children crunching sugar shaped like betrayal. It's a lot to digest, literally. You rest your hands on your belly and feel the rise and fall of mead dreams and spicy regret. Someone begins to play a lute with 2 strings. It's terrible, but comforting. And just when you think you might finally call it a night, you hear a whisper. "Ever had garlic jelly on toasted rye?" You sigh. Of course you haven't, but you're going to, because this is medieval junk food, and you're not out of the woods yet. You try to tell yourself it's curiosity, or historical research, or some kind of immersive anthropological empathy, but deep down, you know the truth. It's addiction. Because when someone whispers garlic jelly on toasted rye and beckons you behind a cart draped in linen embroidered with what might be skulls or just badly stitched onions, you follow, willingly. The vendor is squat, jolly, and missing exactly one eyebrow. He hands you a piece of toasted rye bread, still warm from a skillet. On it, a thick smear of pale gold jelly sparkles in the torchlight. You sniff. It smells sweet. You bite, and your brain panics. Because your tongue is getting mixed signals. Sweetness, yes. But also that unmistakable sting of raw garlic mellowed only slightly by time, sugar, and what might be wine. The toast crackles under your teeth. The jelly coats your tongue like a strange medieval marmalade brewed by someone with very bold opinions. You chew slowly, and then, oddly, it's good. Not just tolerable, genuinely compelling. The flavours settle into something almost modern, sharp, savoury and sweet with just enough toast char to anchor it all. Made it myself, the man says, wiping his hands on his apron. Garlic boiled in mead, bit of vinegar, bit of patience. Garlic preserves, believe it or not, were not unheard of in medieval Europe. Though not widespread, some cooks did attempt to mellow harsh flavours with long, slow cooking and sweeteners. In noble households, where access to mead and wine was easier, experimental jellies like this were sometimes served alongside hard breads, meats or cheese. Of course, scholars still debate whether this was a form of condiment, a medicinal treatment, or a dare disguised as a snack. But your taste buds don't care. You go in for a second bite. The rye toast beneath the jelly is dark, dense, and surprisingly crisp. Probably baked hours ago, then retoasted on a skillet. It's hearty, the kind of bread that would survive a siege, probably outlive it too. And with the garlic jelly spread thickly on top, you suddenly understand something fundamental. Medieval people liked contrast. They didn't do subtle. They did sweet with salty, soft with sharp, and most importantly, they ate boldly. You thank the vendor with a burp and wander back toward the square, where things have shifted once again. The main fire has burned low, the crowd has thinned. But new stalls have emerged, late-night carts lit by candles and hope. One such cart offers syruped roots. You peer closer, parsnips. Yes, the humble parsnip, sliced thin, soaked in syrup, and stacked like coins on a plate of moss. You take one. It's oddly floppy. You chew. It's sweet, earthy, caramelized, and just a little bitter around the edge, like someone tried to make dessert out of ambition and pantry leftovers. You learn that syruped vegetables had their moment in medieval kitchens. Carrots, parsnips, even turnips were glazed with honey or boiled in wine to create unexpected sweets. Some believed they boosted health and, in certain circles, attraction. Yes, these were sometimes billed as aphrodisiacs, which makes you blink mid-chew. A man next to you eats 6 in a row and stares longingly at a candle. You back away gently. A scholar once called such dishes alchemical experiments passed off as dessert, and that tracks. The line between food and medicine in medieval Europe was as thin as your patience for another parsnip coin. But still, you eat another. You don't know why. It's not great, but it's addictive. Like licking a melted candle that smells of soup. From here, the carts get weirder. You pass a man selling roasted chickpeas painted with egg yolk. A child selling clove sticks. Literally sticks dipped in ground cloves and honey. A woman offering carrot fudge that looks like it was dropped during a siege and never recovered. Each one more questionable than the last. Each one served with an enthusiastic grin and a shrug of, well, it's food, isn't it? You realise something. In the medieval world, junk food wasn't just about indulgence. It was survival with flair. It was making something edible, maybe even pleasurable, out of scraps, roots, leftovers and ideas stolen from nobles or borrowed from monasteries. It was resilience. Fried. You reach for another syruped parsnip coin, sigh deeply, and chew. This is your life now, a long walk through time, sweetened with confusion, and as you settle onto a crate watching the moon cast shadows on flour-dusted stalls, you begin to hear whispers of something even stranger up ahead. Something gelatinous, something jiggling, something that may or may not still be moving. And of course, you're going to try it. You've learned to recognise the warning signs by now. Vague smells, too much enthusiasm, food that trembles when it shouldn't. So when a man in a floppy hat gestures you over with a grin and says, "You've got to try the jelly," your instincts kick in. You ignore them. Because curiosity is louder. The jelly in question isn't fruit-based, nor is it the kind of clear, jewel-like preserve you might expect. No, this is meat jelly, dark, quivering, and unnervingly shiny. Set in a wooden mould, it holds the shape of what was probably a fish, or maybe a very tired bird. It glistens in the torchlight like a nervous ghost. It's aspic, the vendor says proudly, with pickled turnip and bits of boiled tongue. You blink. He slices off a piece, places it delicately on a slab of rye, and hands it to you. It jiggles, you bite. It's cold, savoury, and more texture than flavour at first. Then, salt, vinegar, a whisper of meat, a surprise crunch, possibly turnip, possibly cartilage. It's like eating a jellyfish that once had dreams of becoming a stew. You chew politely. Your molars stage a protest. You chew harder. Aspic, savoury meat jelly, was a genuine part of medieval cuisine, especially among the well-fed. Made by boiling bones, skin, and connective tissue to extract natural gelatin. It was cooled into a firm mould and often served as a decorative cold dish. Sometimes it held pieces of meat, eggs, or even flowers suspended inside like unsettling snow globes of dinner. Scholars remain divided on whether these dishes were meant to impress, to preserve, or just to keep bored nobles occupied. One camp believes aspic was about luxury and texture, a kind of edible stained glass. Another suspects it was just the Middle Ages showing off that they could turn soup into sculpture. You're still chewing. The bread beneath the jelly is stale. The aspic has begun to melt slightly under the heat of your fingers, leaving behind a slick sheen. You take another bite anyway, because at this point your taste buds have filed for medieval bankruptcy, and your curiosity is driving the cart. The man offers you a second slice with a smile. This one's pickled tongue and carrot. You decline kindly. To distract yourself, you turn toward another vendor hawking small wooden bowls of something grey and lumpy. You approach cautiously. Wheat mush, she says, with spice. You glance into the bowl. It's beige, thick, bubbling slightly. You nod because no part of you knows how to say no anymore. She hands you a spoon. You scoop. It wobbles. You chew. It tastes like porridge with an identity crisis. Pepper. Clove. Maybe cumin. A faint burn at the back of your throat. The texture is halfway between pudding and gruel with a few unidentifiable crunches. She watches you chew with the serene expression of someone who knows exactly how weird this is. Wheat mush, also called frumenti, was a common dish across medieval Europe. A base of boiled cracked wheat, it could be savoury or sweet depending on what you had to dump into it. Nobles might enrich theirs with almond milk, saffron or egg yolks. Peasants, more likely, added whatever spice or scrap meat was lying around. Either way, it was filling and forgettable, except when it wasn't. Bit of nutmeg too, the woman adds, as though this explains everything. Experts still debate whether heavily spiced versions of frumenti were festive treats, or simply the result of adding too much by accident and pretending it was intentional. Either way, yours tastes like someone spilled a spice drawer into a bowl of damp bread. You thank her. She hands you a second spoonful. You pretend to take it, then casually let it slide back into the bowl, while making eye contact with a nearby dog who looks horrified. You retreat to the edge of the fairground, trying to regroup, your stomach now sounding like a bagpipe with stage fright. And just when you think you've reached your limit, you hear a voice call out, "Fresh wafers, blessed and baked." You turn. A man in clerical robes is doling out paper-thin wafers to a quiet queue of villagers. You get in line. Of course you do. He hands you one. It's thin, crisp, and tastes like flour and air. Maybe a hint of ash. Maybe a whisper of doctrine. You chew it like it's your first communion, or your last. Communion wafers, or their secular cousins, were often made in monasteries and convents using flat iron plates pressed over fire. In many towns, these same irons were later used to make sweet wafers for sale during feast days or public gatherings. Honey was added, or fruit, or sometimes nothing at all but hope and starch. You finish your wafer. Your stomach growls, not in hunger, more like an existential protest. The fair is quieter now. The lights are fewer. The jellies are sweating in the warm night air. Someone is asleep beneath a sausage cart. Another is arguing with a goose. And you've officially eaten jelly with meat, porridge with pepper, and the taste of spiritual ambiguity. And yet, you smell something sweet, something familiar, something dangerously inviting. And you know, you're not done. Not yet. You've reached the stage of the evening where your legs feel like breadsticks, your breath could sterilize iron, and your brain is a fog of fried onions, mead fumes, and questionable jellies. But still that scent cuts through it all. Warm, golden, almost floral. It pulls you like a rope through the crowd, past snoring minstrels and drunk bakers, until you arrive at a little folding table barely lit by a stub of candle. The woman behind it wears a flour-dusted apron and a crown of braided bread. She smiles without showing her teeth and says, "Sweet Tooth's got you, eh?" You nod. You are beyond denial now. She opens a lidded basket and reveals a stack of dense golden cakes soaked in something sticky. Steam rises. Bees hover. A child behind you faints from the sheer smell of it all. "These," she says proudly, "are Mead honey cakes." My grandmother's recipe. Ate one before her wedding, didn't speak for 3 days. We think it was joy. You hold out your hand. She gives you the biggest one. It's warm, heavy, sticky on the edges like an emotional outburst made edible. You bite, and it is everything. Honey. Real, sharp, fermented honey. Not the light floral drizzle you know from modern jars. This is darker, deeper, mixed into a batter of coarsely ground wheat, maybe a hint of almond, and baked until the edges caramelized into sugary armor. Then, just to finish the job, the whole thing has been soaked, bathed in mead. The bread doesn't crumble, it surrenders. Your teeth glide through like a plough through memory. You make a sound that can only be described as ancestral. Sweet breads like this were both treat and tradition in medieval Europe. Honey was the first sweetener long before sugar trickled in through trade routes, and mead was a fermented staple made from honey and water, sweeter than ale, cheaper than wine. Combine the two. That was how you celebrated, bribed your local priest, or proposed marriage. Some mead honey cakes were baked for religious feast days. Others appeared at village weddings or market fairs, and in many cases these cakes were intentionally drenched in mead after baking, to soften the crust and sneak a little cheer into your bones. The scholars are naturally at odds. Some argue these cakes were purely ceremonial, baked only for rare events. Others insist that regional versions appeared all year round, especially in colder months when honey preserved well and folks needed calories and comfort. Your own cake is comforting you very aggressively. As you chew, you find yourself swaying gently in time with your heartbeat. Bees buzz somewhere. A dog barks once and immediately regrets it. The air feels warmer. You finish your cake and find your fingers sticky enough to adhere to stone. You don't care. The woman hands you a cloth napkin and winks. You'll dream sweet tonight. You want to believe her. Around you, the fair is turning slow. Vendors are packing up. Candles are burning low. A man is trying to fold his meat cart like a bedroll. Someone else is asleep in a wheelbarrow filled with parsnips. The world is calming. But just as you start to lean into the sugar haze, the corner of your eye catches something. A flicker, a glint, a tray. It's being carried by a boy no older than 10, who navigates the crowd like he was born with a cart strapped to his back. On it, tiny golden discs stacked in spirals. He whispers something to each passerby. You approach. He looks up. "Care for a wafer?" he says. You hesitate. "Wafers with honey and spice, almond flour, from the Abbey kitchens." "Well, now you're obligated." You take one. It's crisp, shatters with a crack. The honey is baked right in with threads of ginger and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of clove. It tastes like a secret recipe written on parchment and whispered through 10 generations of sleepy monks. It melts on your tongue. You chew slowly. You realize these aren't just snacks. Not anymore. They're stories. They're memories. They're how people, tired, poor, noble, lost, found a way to hold a little joy in the palm of their hand. One bite at a time, you exhale. Your breath smells like warm sin. And still, somewhere in the smoke and sugar, there's one more vendor, one more story, and heaven help you, one more bite. You're floating now, not walking. Floating. Carried by sugar and spice and a worrying level of medieval yeast. You've eaten your way through pies with secrets, candies with regrets, and stews that doubled as medical experiments. And still, the journey continues. The next stall is barely a stall at all, just a worn cloak stretched between 2 barrels, with a single candle flickering beneath. Behind it sits a monk, or at least a man dressed like one. His robe is stained with flour and raisins. His fingers are sticky. His expression is serene. He sees you, nods once, holds up a small cloth pouch. "Candied plums," he whispers, "for sinners and scholars alike." You blink. He opens the pouch and tips 3 plums into your palm. They're shiny, sticky, deep red, almost black in the candlelight, sugar crusted on the edges. You hesitate. He nods again. You bite. The plum collapses instantly in your mouth, soft, syrupy, intensely sweet, with a sudden acidic jolt that makes you wince and grin at the same time. There's spice in there. Cinnamon, definitely. Maybe vinegar, or a wine reduction. Whatever it is, it tingles your gums and punches straight into your brain. "These are illegal in 3 monasteries," the monk says, absolutely deadpan. You cough. He smiles. Candied fruit was a rare treasure in the Middle Ages. Dried fruit was common enough, plums, grapes, apples, but candied fruit, boiled in syrup until preserved and jewel-like, was a luxury. Not just because of the sugar, which was expensive, but because of the labour involved. Each batch had to be soaked, boiled, cooled, rolled, and often spiced. Only the wealthy, or very clever monks could afford the time and tools. Some abbeys, particularly those with medicinal gardens and apothecaries, experimented with fruit preservation as part of their culinary, philosophical, mystical practices. The boundary between sweet treat and sacred tonic blurred, and yes, some orders banned particularly indulgent recipes. Scholars remain divided on whether candied fruit was seen as nourishment, sin, or edible scripture. One theory suggests these sweets were used to bribe scribes. Another holds that they were designed as quiet joy, a form of contemplative chewing during silent evenings. You chew your second plum more slowly. The syrup drips down your thumb. You lick it without shame. The monk nods again, pleased, then leans forward and says, "There's one more thing." You brace yourself. He reaches into his robe and produces a tiny parchment-wrapped parcel. Inside, a miniature square of dried honey cake, so thin it's almost translucent. Pressed into the surface is a single clove. He places it gently into your hand. For the road. You bow slightly. It feels appropriate. As you turn away, he mutters, "Don't chew too fast." It dreams better when it melts. You pop it in your mouth. It does melt. First sweet, then floral, then just a hint of spice warming the roof of your mouth like memory. You close your eyes. You remember nothing and everything. Then, movement. A rustle nearby. You glance to your right and catch sight of a boy sprinting between stools, clutching something close to his chest. Behind him, a woman in a baker's apron yells, "Thief!" but not very loudly. You suspect she's in on it. The boy skids to a stop, sees you, and holds out a hand. "Want one?" You nod. "Why not?" He drops something in your palm and disappears. It's a sugar-glazed plum again, but this time it's been stuffed with something crumbly, nutty. You bite. Almond paste. Sharp, dry, a little bitter. Exactly what you didn't know you needed after so much syrup. Turns out stuffed fruits were another noble delicacy. Plums, dates, even apples, filled with nuts, cheese, herbs, or sweetened grain. They were meant to show skill, to combine textures, and in many cases to surprise the eater. You chew slowly, savouring the contrast. A noblewoman nearby coughs loudly and drops hers into a dog's mouth. The dog does not regret it. You return to the centre of the fair, lips sticky, mind buzzing. Around you, people are settling in. Some lie on hay bales. Others sip hot drinks from clay cups. One man is serenading a lantern. Another is asleep inside a bread cart. And you? You find a crate, lower yourself gently and breathe, because somewhere in your pocket a candied plum is waiting. And you know, deep down, this is the most peaceful chaos you've ever tasted. You sit on the crate, full and glowing like a lantern with legs. The fair spins slowly around you, less a whirlwind now, more a sleepy carousel of flickering light, mumbled stories, and the occasional loud belch of satisfaction. The air has changed too, cooler, quieter, but there's still movement, still food, and most importantly, still one more smell that makes your nose wrinkle and your eyebrows lift in silent worry. You follow it. Of course you do. It leads you behind a hay cart where 3 men huddle around a bubbling pot. The liquid inside is greyish, oily, and gives off the kind of scent that makes your soul lean back slightly. One man grins at you and says, "We call it gut soup." You blink. He gestures to the pot with a long-handled spoon. Stewed offal, mostly tripe, maybe kidney, bit of garlic, some pickled turnips, keeps you warm. You open your mouth to politely decline, but somehow your hand reaches for the spoon. It's handed to you with reverence. The liquid clings to the ladle. Steam rises. The broth is dense, the colour of forgetfulness. You sip. It's not bad. It's actually not bad. Salty, tangy from the vinegar in the turnips, rich from hours of boiling some animal's internal ambition. The tripe is chewy, springy, like edible fabric, and the broth carries a deep, umami hum that humbles you. Add some mustard, the man suggests. You do. Now it's aggressive. Mustard in the Middle Ages wasn't just a condiment. It was therapy. Ground seeds mixed with vinegar, wine, or verjuice, often heated to release their sharpness. Medieval cooks used it to cut through heavy meats, disguise less than fresh ingredients, or simply remind diners they were alive. You take another sip. The pickled turnips bite back. The broth clings to your lips. Boiled guts may sound repulsive to modern ears, but they were a staple in peasant and noble kitchens alike. In a time when waste was unaffordable, every edible piece of an animal was used. Offal, liver, kidney, stomach lining, was boiled, spiced, stewed, stuffed into pies, or served in thin soup as an everyday dish or festival filler. Scholars remain divided on whether these dishes were enjoyed or simply endured. One camp insists offal was prized for its flavour and nutritional value. The other suspects it was just the medieval version of don't ask, just chew. You chew. A chunk of kidney gives you pause. It has a texture somewhere between clay and regret. You swallow and nod appreciatively. The man beside you claps your back. You've got the stomach for it. You don't tell him your stomach just made a high-pitched whining sound like a distant kettle. As you recover, they hand you a small scrap of fried dough, still warm. It's plain, unadorned, slightly greasy. You chew it automatically. Then, from across the square, a familiar scent drifts your way. Pepper. Caraway. Toasted barley. You stand. You follow. And find a small boy sitting beside a brazier with a pan of fritters shaped peculiarly like faces, specifically noble faces, with exaggerated noses and little hats pressed into the dough. He grins up at you. Pea fritters for satire. You blink. Eat the face of your landlord, he adds, holding one up. You take it. It's warm, puffy in the middle, crispy at the edges, smells of mashed peas, garlic, maybe a hint of cumin. You bite into the nobleman's forehead. Delicious, crunchy, soft inside, slightly salty, slightly sweet. One of the better things you've eaten tonight, and you've eaten at least a dozen things that don't belong in polite conversation. Political food was not unheard of in the medieval world. Jesters and street vendors sometimes created edible caricatures, pastries or candies shaped like unpopular figures, a form of protest, a laugh wrapped in lard. Of course, too much mockery got you chased, or worse. You ask the boy if anyone's ever gotten in trouble for these. He nods solemnly. Last year they made one shaped like a bishop, cart got kicked over, pies squashed. But we sold more. He flips a fritter with a stick shaped like a sceptre. You buy 3 more. One looks like a duke. One might be the mayor. The last one is too puffy to identify, but you bite into it with glee. You eat satire now. And as the oil crackles and the boy sings a little ditty about taxes and turnips, you realise you've arrived at something rare. Medieval joy. Found not in palaces, not in scrolls, but here, in a greasy fritter shaped like the local landlord, with a smear of pea filling dribbling down your chin. You're full of guts and laughter and every herb known to the 13th century. The fire dims, the kettle whistles, and just when you think it's over, someone taps your shoulder and whispers, "We have jellyfish." Of course you do. You turn slowly, unsure whether you misheard, dreamed it, or are suffering from medieval spice hallucinations. But no, the voice is real, and the person attached to it, an elderly fisherman with a grey beard and eyes like damp gravel, grins as if he's just said something entirely normal. "Jellyfish," he repeats, holding up a small wooden bowl. "Fried, in goose fat, bit of salt, bit of lemon. You want one?" You do not, and yet you nod. He spears a piece with a twig and holds it out. It jiggles, it glistens. It's about the size of a large coin and the colour of old parchment. You take it, you bite, it squeaks. The outer edge is crisp from the goose fat, but the centre is alarmingly soft. The flavour is oddly subtle, a little fishy, a little salty, a little lemony, mostly texture. Like frying rubber bands and convincing yourself it's gourmet. You chew, slowly, because fast chewing might result in regrets, or choking. "You know," the fisherman says, "they do this in the East. Sliced fine, pickled sometimes, good with strong wine." He says it like it's a compliment to the jellyfish. Jellyfish consumption in medieval Europe wasn't exactly widespread, but evidence suggests some coastal communities experimented with what they had, especially in regions with trade contact across the Mediterranean or beyond. Recipes in certain Sicilian and Levantine records mention jellyfish as salted or pickled additions to stews or served in tangy dressings. But frying them in goose fat, that's likely this man's personal innovation, or a dare that became a tradition. Scholars remain divided, of course. on whether jellyfish were a curiosity, a desperate famine food, or a forgotten delicacy. Some believe sailors ate them while drunk and bored, others that they were introduced by Eastern travellers and immediately regretted by locals. You finish chewing. Somehow you've survived. You thank the man, he offers another. You politely decline and fake a coughing fit. He chuckles knowingly and returns to flipping translucent discs over his fire like he's grilling ghosts. You step away, face flushed from salt and tension, and walk straight into another problem. A girl with enormous eyes and a clay pot is holding up a ladle full of thick green paste. "Try the herb mash," she says cheerfully. "It's fresh." You pause, look at the pot, then back at her. She's already ladled some into a barley cracker and handed it to you. It smells like a garden having an identity crisis. You bite. It's grassy, bitter. There's garlic, of course. There's always garlic. And something peppery, maybe mustard greens mashed with vinegar and breadcrumbs. The cracker beneath it is dry but acts as a sturdy stage for the herb drama happening above. This is pottage, not the soup, but a kind of thick plant-based mash made from whatever greens, roots and forageables could be found. Common among peasants, especially in spring and summer when the first shoots arrived but meat was scarce. Think salad, but angry and boiled. Pottage recipes varied wildly. Some were basic, nettles, water, salt. Others got fancy with wine, vinegar and spices if someone nearby owed you a favour. And many households had their own secret blend, passed down like a family grudge. "Good for the blood," the girl says, scooping another bowl. You're not sure if she means circulation or revenge. You nod and chew. A group nearby sings softly, their mouths full. One man dips a sausage into the herb mash like it's medieval guacamole. Another spreads it on bread and calls it noble sauce. You don't correct him. Then, from across the square, you hear a new vendor shouting, "Sweets! Last call for love and sugar." You follow, grateful to leave jellyfish and herbal warfare behind. At the next stall, a young woman stands beside a tray of small biscuits shaped like flowers. "Wafers with saffron," she says. "Very special." You pick one up. It's delicate, golden, and smells of honey and something subtly floral. You bite. It crumbles instantly, crispy, buttery, with a gentle bloom of saffron on the tongue, a flavour both ancient and timeless. Saffron, the dried stigma of the crocus flower, was one of the most precious spices in the medieval world. Imported from the Middle East and Southern Europe, it cost more per ounce than gold. To bake it into a common wafer, a statement, a celebration, or a quiet indulgence by someone who pinched spice for a year just to make one good dessert. You eat 3 more, slowly. People begin lying down on blankets. Children curl beside dogs. A man plays the same lute chord again and again, searching for a melody. You watch the saffron girl pack her tray, tucking away the last flour biscuit like it's something sacred. You wipe the final crumbs from your lips and sit once more, back resting against a hay bale. You've eaten things that squeaked, things that whispered, things that might haunt your dreams. And still, the fare whispers. There's a smell now, sweet, burnt, smoky. Someone's making popcorn, in goose fat. Of course they are. The scent curls toward you like an old friend bearing questionable snacks. Warm, rich, a little burnt, and undeniably inviting. You shuffle toward it, cloaked in crumbs and mild regret, until you see it. A blackened pot balanced precariously on a bed of coals rattling with promise. A woman with arms like battering rams and a stained apron stirs the pot with a ladle the size of a paddle. She looks up. "Popcorn?" she asks. You blink. "In goose fat?" She nods. "Anything's possible if you're hungry enough." Fair enough. She ladles some into a wide wooden bowl lined with leaves. You peer inside. The popped kernels are irregular, some bloated, some scorched, some barely more than jittery husks. Bits of goose fat glisten on the edges. A few blackened specks cling like scorched memories. You take a handful. You chew. It's glorious, crunchy, smoky, rich in a way that modern popcorn could never be, with that animal fat depth that wraps around your teeth and whispers, "This is survival with flair." Medieval popcorn, you learn in this moment, wasn't called popcorn at all, of course, but grains, especially barley and spelt, were sometimes dry roasted or puffed over heat in pans or iron basins. When tossed in fat, goose lard or tallow, they turned into a crunchy, oily, surprisingly satisfying snack. Add a sprinkle of salt or herbs, and you had what scholars now suspect may have been tavern fare or a cheap substitute for bread when flour ran low. Experts still debate whether this kind of snack was widespread or a hyper-local curiosity born from experimental cooks and extremely forgiving digestive systems. Regardless, you're now fully committed to the idea of goose-fat popcorn. A boy beside you eats an entire bowl in silence, then turns to you and whispers, "I think I love this more than my dog." His dog, sitting patiently nearby, looks genuinely offended. You grab another handful. The fat clings to your fingertips like sticky history. It doesn't feel greasy. It feels earned. The woman refills your bowl with a generous scoop and adds a sprinkle of something that might be thyme. You nod gratefully, then wander off to sit on a hay bale as the kernels crackle between your teeth. Somewhere nearby, someone drops a cup of ale. No one notices. 2 children begin arguing about whether a sausage can be used as a sword. You nod. It can. It absolutely can. You glance down at your bowl, now half empty. A soft breeze cools your face. The goose fat glistens. Then you hear it. "Eggs! Fool's eggs! Get them while they're fake." You turn. A jester in a checkered doublet stands beside a table stacked with what appears to be a basket of hard-boiled eggs. You approach. He grins. "Would you like to crack one open and question your life?" You nod. He hands you one. You knock it gently on the table. The shell breaks. And inside, a mix of almond paste and dried fig puree, dyed pale yellow, packed inside a very realistic fake egg. You blink. "April Fool's Day," he says, holding up another. "Though it's June. Doesn't matter." You take a bite. It's sweet, nutty, a bit grainy, and entirely unexpected. The shell, you realise, is actual eggshell, emptied, cleaned, and filled with dessert. It's bizarre, it's whimsical, it's exactly what this night deserves. Trick foods weren't just a modern invention. Records from medieval feasts describe elaborate joke dishes, roast birds reassembled to look alive, pies that exploded with frogs, desserts shaped like meats. These edible illusions delighted guests, masked ingredients, and sometimes served as low-key political commentary. Scholars remain divided on whether these were common or reserved for the overly theatrical upper crust. But even common folk found ways to surprise each other with reshaped foods and swapped spices. Food was never just about eating. It was about storytelling. And this story, you just ate it. You crack open another egg. This one stuffed with honeyed oats and dried apple. The jester laughs. "We put horseradish in one of them." "Good luck." You put that one back, very calmly. Your popcorn is cold now. You don't mind. You eat another kernel with your fig egg, realizing that your taste buds no longer understand the concept of categories. Sweet, savory, spicy, strange. It all blends together now in the glorious sticky mosaic of the medieval snackscape. You stretch your legs. The fire crackles. Someone plays a sleepy song on a crumhorn. The jester vanishes into the night, shouting something about fermented melons and the Queen's pigeons. And you're still chewing, still learning, still not full. Because beyond the final embers of the popcorn fire, you smell something new. Smoke, honey, cheese. You rise slowly, bones crackling like burnt barley. Time for whatever comes next. You rise with the slow determination of someone who's eaten too much but still wants just one more story. Preferably one served warm, a little smoky, and ideally without surprise rodents or fermented sea creatures. The scent guides you now, soft and curling. Smoke, wood, something creamy, something sharp. You follow it around a collapsed sack of flour and behind a man asleep in a wheelbarrow, until you come to the edge of the fair where the light thins and the night leans in. There, beside a low fire built between 2 stones, sits an old man turning something in a skillet over a lopsided grate. He's wearing a cloak that looks like it was once a curtain, and a hat that may have been a pastry in a previous life. He looks up, eyes twinkling. "Cheesecakes," he says. "Made 'em on a brick." You blink. "On a brick?" He taps the stone beside him, gets hot, does the job. Cheese melts, crust crisps, bit of honey, bit of thyme, maybe a lie or two. You sit down slowly. He offers a thin, round cake, barely thicker than a thumb, blistered golden on the underside, topped with a smear of soft cheese and a drizzle of something amber. You take it. It's warm. You bite. And, oh, it's gentle, soft inside, with a slight chew. The crust is crisp where it hit the stone, like the corner of a perfect pancake. The cheese is creamy, tangy, maybe goat's milk, maybe sheep's, and the honey balances it like a whispered apology. You chew slowly, reverently. "Used to make 'em for my daughter," the man says, flipping another cake. "She'd sell 'em on feast days. Made enough to buy a pig once. Pig was mean, still worth it." You nod because that's exactly the kind of logic that makes sense at this hour. Soft cheesecakes cooked on hot bricks or iron pans weren't uncommon in medieval Europe, especially in villages where ovens were scarce. Portable, versatile and simple to make. These cakes used fresh dough, local cheese, and whatever sweetener was at hand, usually honey, sometimes herbs, sometimes dried fruit, and they were loved. You eat the last bite and immediately accept another. Across the fire a girl joins you, quietly chewing one of her own. She's dipped hers in mustard, a bold move. She does not flinch. You ask the man if there's a recipe. He shrugs. Bit of flour, bit of curd. Listen to the wind. When it hums like a wasp, it's ready. Noted. A dog trots over and licks your hand. You don't stop him. It's fine. You've lost count of how many things you've touched tonight that have touched worse. The fire pops. Sparks drift up. The cheese melts. The girl finishes her cake and pulls from her satchel a small pouch. "Got something for after," she says, holding it out. Inside, dry, crispy crackers dusted with black seeds. "Caraway and salt," she says. "You'll want this after all that honey." She's right. You take one and nibble. It's sharp, simple, like brushing your teeth with history. The caraway seed, a favourite of the medieval pantry, was beloved not just for flavour, but for digestion. After a feast you'd find it in breads, tonics, or just chewed plain to quiet the rebellion in your gut. You crunch another. Your stomach sighs in cautious agreement. Behind you, someone starts singing a lullaby in a language you don't know. A cart creaks past, its wheels muffled by straw. The fire cracks lower now. The cheesecakes are done for the night. The pan is cooling. The wind has changed. The man wraps his last few cakes in cloth and sets them beside him. "For breakfast," he says. You believe him. Then he leans close and adds, "But if you're feeling brave, there's a merchant by the gate. Sells hollow eggs." You raise an eyebrow. "Hollow," he says, "but not empty." You nod. Of course. Because even now, after gut soup, fake plums, goose fat popcorn, satire fritters and jellyfish, the medieval food fair still has more to give. So you thank the man, pat the dog, and rise one last time. Because if there's a hollow egg filled with who knows what waiting at the gate, you owe it to the night to find out. You follow the faint echo of the cheese fire behind you, stepping gently now, as if the ground itself is digesting alongside you. Your cloak drags a trail of breadcrumbs and caramelized regret. You've eaten satire, aspiration, and at least one animal that probably had a name. But this is intrigue. The hollow egg merchant. The very phrase sounds like a riddle. You pass a snoring baker curled up under a flour sack, a pair of lovers sharing pickled turnips by candlelight, and finally arrive at the edge of the fair, where the wind tastes of old smoke and the possibility of danger. There, just by the northern gate, stands a man in a cloak stitched with feathers. A wooden crate rests before him, lined with hay. Nestled in it are eggs, dozens of them. Brown, white, speckled. Some with tiny wax seals, one wrapped in a ribbon. He sees you. "You've come for the mystery," he says, as if reading a menu you didn't know you ordered from. You nod. You don't speak anymore. You conserve energy for chewing and awe. He picks up an egg, rolls it in his palm like a magician, and presents it to you. It's warm and a little too light. "Crack it gently," he whispers. You do. The top pops off with a soft click. Inside is not yolk, but something dense, sweet, a kind of pressed custard, pale yellow with specks of dark brown and a scent like burnt sugar, and something faintly herbal. You tip the contents into your palm. It slides out in one clean piece, a perfect egg-shaped pudding, lightly jiggling. You bite, and it is magic. Sweet like honey, yes, but also earthy. Maybe thyme, maybe clove. The texture is firm but melts with a sigh on your tongue. There's a crunch of sugared almond near the centre, surprise, and a flash of citrus so sudden it makes your eyes water. "Egg of the feast," the man says, "stuffed with spiced egg custard, then baked inside the shell. Monks taught me, or thieves, depends on how you define morality." You take another bite, and for the first time tonight you feel content. No wild spice, no unhinged texture, no eels, just cleverness, tradition, soft sweetness inside something meant to be broken. Stuffed eggs weren't unheard of in medieval kitchens. While not always sweet, they were often used in feast day displays, filled with meat, cheese, or seasoned breadcrumbs. Some cooks, especially those in noble houses or monasteries with too much time on their hands, crafted dessert eggs, delicate moulds of sweetened curd or custard piped back into empty shells, chilled and served with sauces or shaved spices. Experts still debate whether the recipe originated in the Levant, Sicily, or somewhere deeper in monastery kitchens. The jury's still out, but your mouth doesn't care, it's sold. The merchant offers you a second. This one cracks open to reveal a dark, glossy prune paste, thick with cinnamon and clove. You chew slowly. It's like fruitcake in an eggshell, somehow both elegant and threatening. You ask him why he does this. He shrugs. Why does anyone hide treasure in fragile things? Fair point. You sit by the gate and finish your second egg, the shell crunching under your boots. Overhead, the moon has drifted behind a lazy veil of cloud. The fair hums behind you, softer now. Laughter drifts through the smoke. A girl sings something sleepy to a bread doll. You feel full, truly full, not just in the stomach but in the story. And as you sit there, shell bits in your hand, crumbs in your pocket, something brushes your shoulder. A chestnut. Warm. Someone's handing them out again. One final round for those still standing. You take it, of course. The shell cracks. The nut splits. The warmth seeps into your fingers, your chest, your thoughts. And that's when it hits you. You've survived. You've braved blood sausage, jellied fish, cabbage fireballs, and trick eggs. You've chewed your way through satire and sugar, confession and custard. You've tasted a world that lived loud, laughed louder, and knew how to fry rebellion in a pan of goose fat. And still, there's one more flavour left tonight. Because down near the last lantern, where the ash meets the road, a soft hum floats toward you. Sweet roots, good for your dreams. And you smile, you rise, and walk into the scent of sleep. The road bends gently as if guiding you away from indulgence and into something softer. The lantern's thin, the laughter fades. You walk slower now, chestnut shell in one hand, the echo of sugar in your throat. Then you see her. She's not shouting like the others. No songs, no jests. Just a low hum as she tends to a small clay pot suspended over a quiet ember bed. The smoke rises in lazy spirals. The scent is earthy, sweet, and ancient, like roasted dreams and distant memory. She looks up. Sweet parsnips, she says, with syrup and something extra. You ask gently, what's the extra? She smiles without teeth. Hope. That seems fair. She lifts a long-handled spoon and ladles a scoop into a rough wooden cup. Inside are thin slices of roasted parsnip, caramelized around the edges and glazed in something golden. They shine like coins from a forgotten kingdom. You take the cup. The first bite is warm, software a little fibrous, but in a way that feels earned. The syrup tastes like reduced wine and honey, thickened with time and maybe a secret or two. The parsnip itself, earthy, almost spicy, reminds you that vegetables once danced before sugar came to town. You chew slowly, you exhale. Syruped roots were a quiet treasure in medieval kitchens. Sugar was rare, so honey and wine were used to create sticky glazes for whatever root vegetables the soil would surrender. Parsnips, carrots, even beets were candied, roasted or dried into chewy slices that mimicked fruits or replaced meat during fasting days. Some recipes folded them into cakes, others wrapped them in pastry. The boldest simply glazed and served them as they were, humble vegetables disguised as delicacies. Scholars remain divided, and no surprise, on whether these dishes were born of necessity or innovation. Some argue they were tricks of poverty. Others insist they were the foundation of medieval dessert. All you know is, this cup is almost empty, and you're mourning it already. The woman watches you finish. She reaches into her cloak and pulls out a final treat. A small ball of mashed dates and crushed seeds rolled in honeyed crumbs. She places it in your hand. Merchant's kiss, she says, for travel, for dreams. You nod, not trusting your voice. You bite. It's dense, complex. The seeds crackle softly between your teeth. There's a whisper of anise. Maybe sesame. Maybe poppy. The dates bind it all together like a lullaby in your mouth. This was the medieval traveller's snack, nutritious, long-lasting, wrapped in cloth and tucked beside a flask of ale or water. No packaging, no preservatives, just honest food made sticky with time. You lean back against a low stone wall, staring at the stars. A group of vendors passes, pushing empty carts and singing a work song in unison. The fair is winding down. Your stomach, gloriously overwhelmed. Your breath, a bouquet of mustard, clove and uncertainty. And your mind, buzzing with stories, like all that food fed your soul more than your body. You close your eyes for just a moment. Then a voice cuts softly through the night. Last call for wheat mush, spiced and slow, for brave tongues and steady hearts. You groan, not out of reluctance, but because you know you're going. Because when someone whispers wheat mush in a lullaby tone, you don't run, you get in line. You don't remember standing up. One moment you're licking honey from your fingers and blinking at the stars, the next you're moving. Drawn forward by the low hum of sleepy vendors and the scent of roasted grain drifting like a gentle fog through the night. There's a pot now, a deep, iron thing, sitting in a coal cradle. It bubbles softly. Not the dangerous kind of bubbling, like mustard stew or tripe broth, but the patient, forgiving kind. The kind that says, I've been waiting for you. A man with flour in his beard ladles something thick and beige into a wooden bowl. Wheat mush, he says, spiced, sweetened, maybe bewitched. You take it without hesitation. It looks humble, like porridge that wandered too far from home, but it smells warm, safe. You see curls of steam, specks of nutmeg, glints of honey or maybe fig. You stir. It resists a little, clinging to the spoon like a memory. You taste, and it is perfect. Software. Not bland, but quiet. A hush of grain and milk and spice. Gentle heat spreads across your tongue. The sweetness is subtle, like the ghost of a raisin walked through the pot while thinking about sugar. There's a pinch of salt, a dusting of cinnamon, and maybe, just maybe, a fragment of dried plum. It doesn't try to impress you, it just stays. Wheat mush, or frumenti, was the backbone of medieval comfort food. Boiled cracked wheat, sometimes milked, sometimes sweetened, often spiced. Nobles had theirs with saffron or almond milk. Peasants made do with water and hope. But both found peace at the bottom of the bowl. Monks stirred it in silence. Soldiers ate it by firelight. Children were raised on it, and old men sipped it with shaking hands. Scholars still debate whether frumenti was a food of necessity or celebration. Some say it fed the masses. Others point to feast day recipes where it was lavished with currants, clove, and precious spice. Tonight, yours is somewhere in between. You chew slowly, watching the firelight dance in the bowl. Around you, others do the same. No one speaks. No one rushes. A soft clatter of spoons is the only sound, like a lullaby played on wood and breath. A child nearby slumps against her mother's cloak, a smear of mush on her cheek. A man with an eye patch eats with his eyes closed. A girl offers her bowl to a dog, who sniffs it once and decides, respectfully, that this is a human moment. You finish yours. The vendor takes your bowl with a nod and hands you a flat oat cake. Clean the edges, he says. You wipe the bowl, lick the oat cake. It tastes of grain, smoke, and closeness. Somewhere far off, a bell rings. Not a loud bell, not a bell for warning or war, just a soft rhythmic tolling, like a reminder that even feasts must sleep. You walk now, slower, heavier, but not tired? No, not yet. Not while the night still hums. You pass a man selling tiny nutcakes shaped like hearts. A woman handing out warm cider laced with rosemary. You smell meat, but it's fading now, dissolving into dreams. You see a circle of people seated on logs, sharing roasted roots from a communal pot. No vendor, no exchange, just hands and heat and quiet chewing. You stop beside them. A man breaks off a piece of carrot and offers it to you. You accept it. It's soft, smoky, a little sweet. You nod. No one says anything. You sit. The pot steams, the logs creak. Someone hums, and you realise this is the part of the night that wasn't on any recipe scroll. The shared silence, the sleepy chewing, the warmth that doesn't come from spice or fat or fire, but from having eaten with strangers who, for a few magical hours, became something like family. And just when your eyes begin to drift closed, someone whispers, There's still one vendor left. You open one eye. They smile. He sells satire in sugar. Of course he does. You stand. Again. Because this night isn't over. Not quite. You rise like a loaf left too long in the oven, slow, warm, and a little bit cracked at the edges. Your knees creak in rhythm with the silence. Around you the fare has thinned to ghosts, shadows, sleeping vendors and flickering lanterns that burn more out of habit than purpose. But you follow the whisper, the one about satire, in sugar. Because why wouldn't you? You shuffle through the last rows of carts and barrels, past snoozing dogs and lullabies sung to leftover pies, and there, beneath a crooked banner that reads "Wit on a Stick," you find him. The man is tall, thin, and utterly over it. His moustache curls like pastry dough. His eyes gleam with mischief and something stickier. His cart, in contrast, is a masterpiece, lined with trays of candy caricatures, cookies shaped like nobles with ridiculous noses, fudge busts of knights with tiny swords poking their own feet, sugar skulls of tax collectors grinning with broken teeth. He looks at you and says, "You look like someone who can handle a biting dessert." You nod solemnly. He hands you a lollipop moulded into the face of a bishop, complete with frosting eyebrows and licorice sneer. You lick it. It's lemon and judgmental. Satirical sweets weren't just whimsy. They were protest, performance, personality in pastry form. Especially during feast days and festivals, bakers and street performers created edible jabs at authority figures, local lords, greedy abbots, and even unpopular neighbours. Cookies shaped like waddling sheriffs, candied versions of infamous tavern brawlers, marshmallow monks whose bellies jiggled with overindulgence. And the people, they ate it up, literally. "It's good luck to eat the one you fear," the vendor says as he lifts a tray of cookies shaped like executioners dropping their own axes. You pick a marzipan magistrate and bite off his powdered wig. He crumbles like tyranny on a wet afternoon. "These weren't just jokes," the man adds, scooping a handful of sugar scrolls with gossip etched in icing. "They were stories, truth with honey." You believe him. Every chew confirms it. One biscuit, shaped like a mayor, is stuffed with chili-spiced jam. You yelp softly. "Power always burns." He nods. Another, a little sugar monk, tastes bland and doughy, with a surprise walnut at the centre. "Penance," he says. You eat 3 more. A gingerbread countess, a honey wax taxman, and a donut shaped like a castle wall. The castle crumbles beautifully in your hands. Experts note that during moments of civic unrest or playful revolt, edible satire became a coping mechanism. In a world ruled by hierarchy and superstition, biting into your oppressor's sugary likeness was bold, even healing. A quiet, harmless rebellion, unless the wrong person saw you chewing the abbot's sugar beard. Scholars remain divided on whether such sweets were tolerated, ignored, or occasionally punished. Some say they were dismissed as harmless jokes. Others suggest bakers were fined, mocked, or mysteriously relocated for crossing an unseen confectionery line. But tonight, no one stops you. You stand before the cart, sticky with sugar and subversion, smiling like a fool. The vendor hands you one last piece, a cookie shaped like yourself. Somehow, slightly crooked nose, cloak full of crumbs, eyebrows permanently raised. You stare. He says nothing. You eat it. It tastes like roasted barley and in a piece. Behind you, the firelight dims further. The wind picks up. The candy skulls rattle softly on their sticks. You thank him. He winks, then starts packing up, his tray of edible satire disappearing beneath cloth and candle wax. You walk on, chewing the last crumbs of yourself. Around the corner you hear soft humming and the scrape of bread being sliced. Another stall, one more bite. You laugh, because you know the rule by now. It's never really over until you eat the crumbs of the night. You don't even question the sound anymore. The soft scrape of a crust knife against stale bread, the rhythmic swish of a butter brush, the sigh of someone heating something for the final time that night. You just follow it. Like sleepwalking, but sticky and full of carbs. You round the corner and find it, the last proper food cart of the fair. Nothing fancy, no banners, no singing, just an old woman with a shawl shaped like a tablecloth and a knife that's older than your regrets. On the counter before her, crumbs. Crumbs of everything. Spice cake shavings, crusts from miniature pies, ends of oat biscuits, caraway cracker rubble, hardened honey smears, a broken cherry tart with exactly 1 cherry left. It looks like someone swept the entire fair's leftovers into one wooden tray and decided to serve history by the handful. She gestures. Crumb bowl? You nod. She takes a ladle. Not a big one, not a small one, just right. And scoops from the tray into a thick ceramic bowl lined with what looks like toasted barley mush. She adds a splash of something dark. Stewed plum sauce, maybe. Then she grinds something over the top. Salt, clove, ash. Eat while it's warm, she says. You sit. You lift a spoon. You taste. And somehow, it's perfect. Sweet. Salty. Soft. But with crunches in all the right places. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. But every spoonful tells a story. One you've already lived tonight. Bit of onion bread here. A hint of mustard. A raisin. Whole and bold. Like a cameo from Act 1 of your digestion. There's even a ghost of that jellyfish texture tucked somewhere deep in a breadcrumb you choose not to investigate. You laugh. Quietly. Memory stew, the woman says, smiling like she's been waiting all night to name it. She's not wrong. This is everything. The sweet, the strange, the sour, the spiced. This is how the medieval mind made peace with waste, with excess, with chance. Crumb bowls or bread pottages were one of the great improvisations of the era. When food was scarce, nothing went to waste. Leftover bread was soaked in broth, sweetened with wine or simmered in milk, then layered with whatever could be spared. Bits of cheese, dried fruit, meat shreds, or roasted nuts. It was breakfast, dessert, and comfort food rolled into one bowl of edible memory. Some scholars call it panada. Others list it as sops or mess. The truth, it didn't need a name. It just needed a spoon. You eat slowly, every bite softer than the last. The heat from the barley base warms your chest. Your eyelids droop. Your thoughts drift, not away from the food, but into it. You remember the first pie, the cabbage fireball, the sugar skulls, the monk with the candied plums, the girl with the satire fritters, the popcorn and goose fat. You chew, and they all come back to you, not as flavours, but as characters. A play made edible. The woman sits beside you now, slicing what's left of a cheesecake into fingernail-sized pieces. She hums. Not a tune, just the sound of someone finishing a day. She passes you one. You eat it without looking. It's cold now, still lovely. Got one more course, she says, but it's not food. You look up. She taps your temple with the back of her knife. Dreams, she says, that's dessert. And with that she sets her tray aside, stands and walks into the dark. You hear a cartwheel creak once and then she's gone. You're alone. Almost. There's still the bowl in your lap. One last spoonful. You take it. It tastes like the end of a story. Software sweet. Just a little sad, but final. Until, from somewhere behind you, soft footsteps approach. A child's voice whispers, "Did you try the sugar-wrapped fish bones?" You sigh. You smile. You stand. You rise like smoke, gently, reluctantly, the warmth of the crumb bowl still lingering in your palms. The stars overhead have dimmed, washed out by dawn's slow stretch across the horizon. The fire pits are embers. The stalls are shadows. The fair is no longer a riot. It's a memory, unravelling around you like steam from a cooling cup. But there's one more voice, one more tale hiding in a half-lit alley where breadcrumbs meet fate. The child's voice tugs at you. He's still got them, the bones. With sugar you follow. It brings you to the very edge of the square, where the cobblestones turn to packed dirt and the scent of roasted things gives way to salt, ash, and old iron. A man sits cross-legged on a folded tarp. He's surrounded by a circle of woven baskets, each one filled with bones, tiny fish bones, glinting, fragile, some curled, some straight, all of them coated in a glossy shell of sugar so fine it catches the earliest threads of morning light and refracts them like broken promises. You blink. Why? He shrugs. Because people throw them away, but bones remember, and sugar forgives. He hands you one. A thin, curved spine wrapped in crystallized sweetness. You hesitate for half a heartbeat, then bite. It shatters, and it's not awful. Sweet first, of course, then earthy, salty. The texture is brittle, but not sharp, like hard caramel layered over dried cartilage. You chew carefully, slowly. It doesn't fight back. It simply dissolves into your teeth and vanishes down your throat like a story without a moral. He hands you another. This one is longer, maybe from a river trout. It has tiny sugar seeds embedded into the glaze. That one's celebratory, he says. Weddings or funerals, depending how it ends. You eat that too, because this is what the end looks like here. Not grand or noble, just bones wrapped in kindness. One last taste, one last lesson. Fish bones, after all, weren't always discarded in the medieval kitchen. In some traditions, bones were boiled for broth, ground for flour, or dried and eaten whole when famine loomed. But wrapping them in sugar? That's the twist of the night. The kind of thing only the strangest corners of the world, or the most creative cooks, would dare. Historians argue whether this was ever truly done. Most say no. Some whisper yes. But you? You've tasted it. It exists now. The man nods at you. You've had enough. You nod back. For once, you agree. The child tugs your sleeve and places a final offering in your hand, a dried fig, flattened and marked with an X. You eat this when you're ready to sleep, they whisper. You thank them. You don't eat it yet. You walk. Back through the square now, where vendors sleep inside their carts, where the jester's bells lie still, where the monk's robe is folded on a bench. You pass the cheese fire, now ash, the crumb stall packed away, the jellyfish man, vanished into mist, and as the first orange strands of morning slide down the rooftops, you find your hay bale again. Sit, and finally, you eat the fig. The sweetness spreads slowly across your tongue, the way sunlight creeps across stone. It's quiet now, inside and out. The noise, the fire, the spice, all of it fades. In your belly, a warm hum. In your chest, the fullness of stories chewed and swallowed. Your body is heavy, comfortably so, like a sack of flour carried home. Your breath slows, your shoulders drop. The last trace of garlic on your lips becomes a distant breeze, and your fingers, still a little sticky, rest gently on your lap like crumbs after a feast. The fig finishes melting, soft as memory. Your eyes begin to close, not from exhaustion, but satisfaction. The kind that only comes from wandering strange streets, eating stranger things, and finding somehow that it all made sense, that every flavour had a voice, every stall had a soul, and every bite told you something you didn't know you needed to hear. The stars above you are quiet now. The wind is soft. The sky is brushing against blue, but your mind floats in gold. And as the fair dissolves into morning, cart by cart, bite by bite, you wrap your cloak around your body like the last story left to tell. Because tonight, you didn't just eat history. You became it. End of script. Sweet dreams.